Well, welcome everyone to the top 5 takeaways from the 2017 RIS and IHL Store System Study webinar, which is hosted today by RIS News and presented by Hughes. Hello, I'm Joe Scarupa, Editorial Director of RIS News, and I'm glad you could be with us today for key findings from really the first major retail technology benchmark study of the year. There's a gap opening up between IT-fueled retailers and others in the industry who are maintaining traditional levels of IT investment. I wonder which camp or which category you fall into. It's worth thinking about because according to the study, it is clear that a technology debt is accruing for retailers who are not modifying their IT budgets beyond incremental increases. By many measurements, the economy today is not measured by incremental increases. In fact, what our study says is that for retailers who want to catch up to those who are currently the market leaders, who we identify just to give retailers an idea as Amazon and Walmart and a few others, what we find is that retailers say to get to that level, they would have to increase their IT budget 65% to catch up to those capabilities. Now, this is one of the key findings in the 14th annual RIS and IHL Store System study. And by the way, it's available for one-click download by you at the top of your screen. If you look up there, you can find it. I urge you to download it to look at it later or follow along. Now, other key findings in this study include more than a third of retailers say software spending will be on cloud-based solutions, which is a major shift in priorities away from traditional perpetually licensed applications. We also find that unified commerce continues to build momentum with advanced order management, POS, and mobile capabilities leading the way. And retail leaders are pulling away from laggards who are left with risky options for future viability in a fast-moving retail environment. Now, my special guests today on the webinar are Lee Holman of the IHL Group and Tim Tang of our title sponsor, Hughes. Lee is the lead retail analyst for the IHL Group and has over 30 years of experience in high technology. Beginning with his work on nuclear subs for the U.S. Navy, on to assignments with various defense contractors, Lee has been involved in design, development, procurement, and deployment of many projects used in various public and private sectors. Since joining IHL in 1997, Lee has authored and co-authored retail industry reports and market studies on POS terminals, self-checkout systems, self-service kiosks, out-of-stocks, mobility, and, of course, the annual RIS IHL Store System study, which we're talking about here. Now, he's also been featured as a speaker in both live and webinar settings, including those conferences that RIS hosts. And Lee is a big supporter of retail ROI, as is RIS News. And also, I know Tim Tang is from Hughes. So Lee's been extensively quoted in the national and regional media, and I'm glad to have you back on our webinar series, Lee. And by the way, Lee, I also want to say that in the fast-moving world of today, RIS has partnered with the IHL Group on the Source System study for 14 consecutive years. It's a great partnership, and I look forward to many more years. So welcome today, Lee.
Thanks, Joe. It's always an honor.
And Lee, joining us today on the panel is Tim Tang, who is another long-standing partner of RIS. And Tim fully leverages his background in both social and engineering sciences to maximize the business value of innovative technologies in retail and restaurant markets. He has over 20 years of experience in working with Fortune 500 enterprise customers to address opportunities in customer engagement, employee training, Wi-Fi, digital media, network security, cloud, WAN optimization, and he also has held business development, product development, and market development roles within Hughes. Thanks a lot for joining us today, Tim. Are you ready to get started?
Absolutely. It's a privilege to be here, and I think we have a very interesting topic ahead of us.
I certainly do. Many interesting topics in the plural, so we do plan to cover them. Now, before we get started, I want everyone who's here today in this session to know that we want it to be as interactive as possible. I checked who's attending, and there are some people that we know in the audience, so I look forward to your questions. Get involved. Let us know your feedback, and please use the web tools on your screen for questions or comments. Both are equally valid, and both are equally welcome. Do this at any time during the webinar. I guarantee it will be much more fun and informative for all of us. Now, Lee, I want to bring you in now and You know, we worked together for many months, actually, on the study. It goes back all the way to probably August. That's a lot of time. Do you think it was worth it? Did we find anything interesting?
Joe, every time we do this study, we find something that's new and different that it makes us stop and think about where things are going.
Sounds good. So let's jump right in.
All right. Thank you for that. Real quick, IHL is a global research and advisory firm. We focus on information technology as it's used in the retail and the hospitality arenas. Here's a little bit about what we do and the folks that we do it for. We're a small shop, but we've got an outstanding stable of clients that we really seek to do the very best for day in and day out. As we look back just a little bit at 2016, overall for the year, retail sales were up about 2.5%, which is outpaces the economy. Online was up almost 16%, now comprises approximately 8.5% of all retail here in the U.S. You've probably seen the holiday sales information that I'm showing on the screen right now. Long story short, up between 3.6 and 4.9%, depending on who you talk to. For overall retail sales, online up between 11 and 17%. The real big number, though, is down there near the bottom. Amazon, 38% of all online sales for the holidays, and almost half of all online sales in that last-minute push to get things delivered before Christmas. That's huge numbers for Amazon. As we looked at the study, again, this is the first tech study that gets released each year in retail, and we query a bunch of retailers and get their feedback and get their responses to the questions we have, and as we sift through the data, we try to find those 5 key things that we really want to focus on going forward. And what you see on the screen right now are the 5 that we saw as being the most pertinent for retailers moving forward. Again, as with last year, store count and IT spend is growing. Cloud is continuing to grow and become a very vibrant part of retail. Unified commerce continues to gain traction in moving forward, and those are all pretty much first order analysis kind of things from the data. Second order analysis kind of things are the last 2 bullets there. The gap between the leading and lagging retailers is widening, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And the last bullet point there, that if retailers are simply relying upon developing their IT spend based upon what revenues they generated in the past year, they will get swallowed up within 2 to 3 to 4 years. So that's our estimate and justification going forward. For the rest of the study today, just want to touch base on a couple of things so that we can keep track of what we're talking about. Foundational technologies when we're talking about unified commerce. Order management system, basically that centralized hub that serves as a repository for data for products, customers, and suppliers, and that's like a key technology that retailers need to embrace in order to get one version of the truth for all those things. The second bullet there is the single view of the customer. Lee Holman walking into the bricks and mortar retail needs to have the same customer loyalty profile as he does when he's using his mobile phone or when he's at home using the online access. This is really, really important, and you can talk about frictionless or seamless interface for the customer. This really important stuff. Finally, the last bullet there, up-to-date POS that can take advantage of these first 2. These are the foundational kinds of things we see for unified commerce. We're also going to talk in this study about retailers that are leaders, that are average, and that are below average. And we're doing this based upon a question that we asked in the study. Simply, we asked retailers what their expectations were for revenue growth for 2016. And as we stratified the data, we found some nice cutoff points, and you can see them there in the bullets, the sub-bullets. And from a statistical standpoint, these are significant. There's no small sample size errors or anything like that going on here. So these are the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about in the study in the next handful of slides. With that, let me toss it back to Joe, because I know he had a couple questions.
Yeah, Lee, that was a great way to present us with the top 5 takeaways. Really a big picture overview of some areas that we're going to dive into a little deeper. And I want to bring Tim Tang in from Hughes. And Tim, Lee has mentioned some big trends for 2017. Which one or ones of those do you believe stand out in importance for retailers?
The trends that Lee highlight, I think what's encouraging is that there aren't any too dramatic surprises here. These are things that we've expected, we've seen over the past couple of years. It's encouraging to see the greater investments into the stores, into IT, into the cloud, and even some of the progress that's made in the unified commerce arena too as well. But it's those last 2 bullets that were alluded to that are also not unexpected, that have been around for a while. And as we look at quantifying this, and as we start to think through this, the real challenge is what do we do about these gaps, and what can we do differently to improve positioning over the previous years in terms of the opportunity?
Great. I've got the wrong slide sitting here. Here we go. Okay, now stepping back into the data from the study. This is a question that we've asked year after year, and basically trying to get a feel from the retailers about where they're going in terms of store count and what they're doing with remodels and so forth. And as you can see, the numbers are all positive. The 2 groupings that you see there, the FDC, that's food, drugs, C-stores, and mass merchants and warehouse clubs. The GMS refers to specialty retailers and department stores. The blue pertains to store count, the orange for remodels. And the thing to keep in mind here is that for both of these categories, in terms of the store count and the remodel increase, we're talking about IT spend here, because typically retailers do not put old tech into new paint. I mean, it just isn't done very often. And so that's good news for vendors going forward. Some of the granularity there, the numbers that we're seeing for store count and store growth and so forth, these are among the highest figures we've seen since we've been doing this study. It's a big deal here. And I'll say this, the study ran between October 17th and November 23rd. So the election came, kind of in the middle there. When you look at the responses, about 40% before and 60% after, there seems to be a sense of optimism going forward that, we've seen some before, but not quite to this extent. So this is exciting for retail. Taking the same data and this time cutting it by retail tier, in other words, the size of retailers. On the left-hand side, we've got the smaller retailers. Right-hand side, we've got the larger retailers. And the 2 curves there, the enterprise spend and the store spend. Bottom line for this chart, 2017 is going to be a good year to be a vendor. I mean, everybody is looking to spend money on retail IT. Some of the granularity there, in terms of the enterprise IT spend, we saw an increase of almost 23% over the past 5 years. And as analysts, we look at that, and the assessment that we're making is that during this time, retailers have been spending money to get their back-end systems in order to embrace this idea of unified commerce. So they're getting they're getting the back-end systems in place before they start spending heavily on the store technology. And that's what we're seeing increasing in a big way this year. Store IT spend growth is up 21% from last year. And as we'll see in a few other slides, there's some pretty heavy POS numbers that that are coming up. And you can see a couple of the segments there, especially soft and food and grocery, especially so for growth going forward. Now this chart here is this goes back to what we were talking about before about leaders and average and below average type retailers. We took the exact same data and sliced it by those types of retailers. Well, not types of retailers, but those categories of retailers. And this is what we found. And, you know, this is one of those statistical chicken or the egg causation kind of things here. Are these retailers leaders because they spent, or are these retailers spending because they're leaders? You know, this kind of thing. And we can debate that until the cows come home. The reality is, because I get to see the actual responses of retailers, some in this group, the blue group there, the leading retailers, these are clearly retailers that we've been considered, yeah, these guys are definitely leaders in the industry when it comes to technology. So, you know, for me, it's pretty easy to sit there and claim that, but I can't reveal that data because we just don't reveal the names of retailers in the course of this kind of study. Here's the thing, though. These retailers are spending they're increasing their spend 3 to 4 times as fast as the retailers that are down there in the purple boxes. This is a big deal, and this is kind of, you know, it reminds me of the story about the bear and the 2 campers. And the bear starts chasing him, and the one camper kneels down and starts tying their sneakers. And the other says, "What are you doing?" And basically the response is, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just need to outrun you." And so retailers, you know, in some cases, they're not looking to go toe-to-toe with Amazon, but they're looking to do everything they can to compete well with those that they bunt heads with in the course of the regular business day. So that's what we're seeing with this slide. Now, I mentioned Amazon, and, you know, over the course of the past, especially the past 3-4 years, Amazon has had a huge impact in retail. And, you know, there's a variety of reasons for that. I mean, we can talk about Amazon Prime and the fact that, you know, more than half of all U.S. households have a Prime account, and 70% of, you know, the annual income households of 110 grand or more have Prime accounts. And, you know, you can talk about, you know, well, it's because of the free movies or the free ebooks or because of the free 2-day shipping or what have you. The reality is this is a direct shot at those that have disposable income. Amazon has made this very plain. And they weren't satisfied just with growing from being the world's largest bookstore now to, you know, one of the world's largest retailers. They're also a service provider. When you talk about AWS or Amazon Web Services as being the platform for cloud services and so forth, you know, right now that constitutes 10% of their revenue. And the growth of that is approaching 60% a year. Now, there are retailers that are using AWS directly. In other words, they contract directly with Amazon for that, and some that are using AWS in a third-party role. And the reality there is these retailers are paying Amazon for the privilege of being able to compete with them. That's a stunning revelation for some retailers, and it's a heavy thought when you just try and wrap your head around it. Now, that $15.1 billion that you see there on the screen, that is what Amazon spent last year on innovation. That's not keeping the lights on. That's not shipping. That's not COGS or anything like that. That is pure R&D work and looking over the horizon a little bit and seeing what might be out there that they can take advantage of. Now, that $15.1 billion, that sounds like a lot, but what does it really mean? Well, what it means is that's more than all of these retailers combined when you're looking at just innovation spend. Yes, retailers are being outgunned by Amazon in a big, big way in this matter. And this is one of the things that we at IHL have been looking at for the past, probably 1.5 to 2 years. And here's what we come with. one of the questions that we asked in the study was, what is it going to take for you guys to be able to compete with Amazon? And we've done other studies as well. We've asked a similar question from a little bit different direction. And the long story short is retailers need to see an 87 to 237% increase in their IT spend over the course of the next 2 to 3 years in order to be able to compete effectively with Amazon. The gap between where they are now, 4.7% increase in this year's study, and where they need to be in order to compete with Amazon, we're calling that TIGER, the Technology Innovation Gap in Retail. And retailers really need to embrace the idea that this is a transformational spend that they're considering. It cannot be based on how they did last year from a revenue standpoint. This is big news kind of stuff here. And with that, let me toss it over the fence to Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Really interesting look at things. And to put technology spend into perspective, what we have found over the course of many years is that on average, retailers spend less than 2% on their technology budget as a factor of their overall revenue. So to go up to Lee's point of 100% or 200%, that would mean increasing that 2% of revenue to 3% of revenue or 4% of revenue. And very few retailers actually ever do that. But Lee is pointing out, hey, maybe it's time to think of catching up. Now, Tim, what can mainstream retailers focus on in this economic environment that Lee is describing here, where leaders are pulling away? Amazon is dominant and traditional strategies need changing.
87 to 237% increase in IT spend over the next 2 to 3 years is a non-starter. It won't happen. It doesn't happen unless somebody acquires somebody or a massive amount of capital comes out from, or priorities are completely reallocated to a large extent. So as we think through this, though, and as we think about it, a couple of points to encourage for consideration. Encourage retailers to think in terms of the power of the dollar versus business results. And what I mean by that is, for every dollar that Amazon spends in innovation, ask yourself, how much can they improve their business and their sales revenue? That might be one way to think of this problem. And then as you think about your own retail, for every dollar that you were to spend in innovation, how much more could we improve? Amazon is an enormously efficient machine, and it will have to do dramatic things with drones and self-driving cars to completely transform the landscape of retail. But for the mainstream retailer, there is an enormous amount of unlocked opportunity and potential within the stores. There are places where a dollar spent by a retailer, properly prioritized, can have a dramatic impact on the business results of those stores, and percentage-wise could be an unfair advantage. Unlocking the dollar spent by a retailer in the store can not only improve the business performance, but also dramatically reduce the operational cost. And both of those kind of work to feed that, closing that gap. The other point that I would make is to think iteratively. This is not a one-season game. The game of retail is not played out over one holiday season versus it's a game of year after year after year. And maybe that 4% won't jump to 87% next year. But the 4.7% could jump up to 6%. A lot of that is outside of the control. So much of retail IT spend is, as mentioned earlier, a proportion of sales performance to a large extent. And that IT has no control over. But what IT does have control over is how to handle the incremental funds. And so if it does go up to 6%, what is the best way to spend that 1.3%? And if your retailer were to happen to hit a dramatically successful product and it were to jump up from the 4.7 to 10%, what would you do with the almost double the budget? But it's going to be a step-by-step, one cycle after another cycle in order to start closing this gap. It won't be, unless something dramatically happens, an 87% increase in next year's budget. That's just not practical.
Well, so good point.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I was just going to say good points, and I think if I would summarize it, play the smart spending game, look at the value of the impact as opposed to the volume of the dollars being spent, and play the long game. And Lee, I'll turn it over to you in a second, but let me just say that a good question came in pointing out how to spend in a very smart way and how to leverage things that actually have a multiplier effect. And we're going to get to that during our question and answer period, and I do want to encourage others to send in a comment. But this is a great comment, and we will get to it later. But let everyone know that comments like this, in a good place like this, will be addressed toward the end of our webinar, so stick around for that. So back to you, Lee.
Great. Good points, Tim. Good stuff. Once again, stepping into the data, this is another question that we ask year to year, because we want to track where retailers' thoughts are in terms of what's keeping them up at night. What are the things that they're really focusing on and moving forward with. And as it has been in days gone by, CRM and loyalty programs, they tend to be up there in the top 2 or 3. Year in and year out, and that's, we expect that, because CRM is not a fire and forget kind of technology. There's you launch it and then you refine it and you continue to help it get smarter every year. The single view of the customer and the single order management, those are things we mentioned earlier. In terms of the foundational type of technologies for unified commerce, yes, these are important to retailers this year as they're embracing the idea of unified commerce. Inventory visibility. Now, this is a really cool one. We've had this on the Stack Up before, and it's becoming more important, because as retailers try to do new and different things, for instance, ship from store, it's really important to be able to have a good, clear inventory count on each and every one of the stores that you're planning on incorporating that capability into. If you don't, then you're looking at a real train wreck, because not only is your customer not leaving your store with the item, but when you make the promise to deliver it from, XYZ store that's going to happen the next day, and it doesn't show up, then you've got a double disappointment on them. Lowering supply chain costs, Tier 1 retailers and the leading retailers in our study here are the ones that are focusing on that in a big way, because there's lots of dollars in there that can be saved. And then you can see some of the others. Mobile for associates, that's actually moved down the ladder just a little bit, but that's mainly due to the fact that there's now been a handful of years of them actually having devices out there that in some cases it's been trial and error to get just the right device for just the right kind of retailer deployed. And we've had all kinds of stories about, finding devices that are just stuffed in drawers and so forth. But this tends to, and those tend to be mobile POS. These tend to be the devices that store associates are actually assisting customers with in the stores, in the aisles. Good information there. And some of the other things, empowering store associates, this has also moved down a little bit as retailers have invested in getting some of this stuff taken care of, as they've taken care of the back-end systems and now moving forward into the stores. IT transformation, 23%. Now you might think that's a really low number, but the reality is, retailers are waking up to the idea that, it's not business as usual anymore. It's we can't do siloed tech anymore in terms of the channels and so forth. They need to be able to make some kind of transformation happen in their IT spend and in their deployments. And I know Tim is looking forward to being able to speak about the Store Comms update here. And the only thing I'll say about it before he has a chance is retailers spent a fair amount of money in the past 7 or 8 years or so making sure that the pipe size to the stores is increased. In other words, they might not have been embracing mobile POS yet, but they were getting ready for it. They might not have been embracing cloud yet, but they were getting ready for it. So they took care of the pipe to the store, and then there's a fair number of retailers that have spent a great deal of time and effort to get their store comms updated so that the Wi-Fi can be used by not just the store employees, but by the consumers as well. And I know Tim's got some things he wants to say about that. So let me hand it over to Tim real quick.
I would just jump in here real quick and thinking that we had a lot of discussion and a lot of debate about what does this mean. It began with, if you look at the IT priorities and the kind of all the things on the top, all the high priorities, the CRM, the management, the cloud, inventory visibility, all the things that are moving to the cloud dependent upon the network. And then you see at the very bottom there, the store comms upgrade, the smallest IT investment. And is it because retailers are done? Have they spent what they need to spend and they're good to go as it relates to the network infrastructure in the stores? That could be one theory. I have yet to meet a retailer or a line of business executive, marketing, and retail operations who is satisfied, though, with their connectivity to their stores. This has been a continual pain point for them. What I more commonly see is just there's nothing that they can do about it. They're stuck. They've bought what they can get to the store, and if they could find something more, they would buy it. But for what they have right now, or what they see is essentially what they get. My suspicion is that the reason that number is so small is because there isn't really a meaningful opportunity, short of doing tens of thousands of dollars in build-out costs to expand and address the problem in a more adequate manner. So I suspect my interpretation of this is that if there were an opportunity to bring more capacity to the store, that would be eaten up. Because there's not, what's been spent, what can be spent has been spent, and we're looking at still a fairly meaningful problem. Greater and greater dependence on the infrastructure in the cloud, but still a bottleneck of sorts as it relates to the store infrastructure.
Yeah. Pointing back to that slide, once again, taking that same data and slicing it according to what we're calling the leader retailers. Some of the priorities come out way above the average retailers. And there's IT transformation, 135% higher priority. In other words, these retailers, the ones we're calling leaders, recognize the importance of IT transformation, and so they're putting a heavier emphasis upon it. Same thing with lowering supply chain costs. There's dollars in there that need to be saved. Associate training and tools, maybe these retailers are the ones that have actually done the kinds of things that Tim's talking about. They've increased the pipe size. They've done everything they can for their store infrastructure. Now they're able to train their associates and give them new tools to work with. Inventory visibility, same thing we talked about before. It's important for retailers to be able to have a good, clean understanding of what is in each and every one of their stores if they're going to embrace the idea of ship from store. And then clienteling and assisted selling. That's a quarter percent above what the average retailer is doing. And then we talk about the cloud, and then Tim spoke on that just a brief moment ago. Keep in mind, just 3 to 4 years ago, all of the numbers on this slide here were zero, zip, nada. And now we're looking at situations where retailers are spending almost half of their software spend for the coming year in the cloud. In the case of e-commerce, 47% of it. In the case of sales and marketing, 46%. These are really, really big numbers given the fact that they were nil just a handful of years ago. Some of the things, I remember having conversations with retailers about their store systems in the cloud and saying there's no way we would ever do that. No stinking way. And here we have over a quarter of the software spend in store systems is going to be in the cloud this year. That's a huge thing. Remember, they use the term mission critical for this kind of thing. That's an illustration of the work that vendors have done in terms of getting this stuff to be reliable, and in terms of retailers doing their hard work. Keep in mind, the IT spend that we're talking about from previous slides, to transform and be able to compete, the only way that most retailers are going to be able to get there is by embracing the cloud, because this is the one way that they can actually have a jump start and have nothing to do with a huge capital expenditure. In the case of pay-as-you-go kind of situations, this is the one way that retailers can advance, can transform, and be able to compete down the road. Some of the other numbers here, core core ERP, 30%, almost a third of ERP spend is going to be in the cloud this year, and 25% for supply chain. These are really, really big numbers. Now, again, taking that same data and this time slicing it by size of retailer, we have Tier 1 there in the center column and Tier 2 and 3 on the right-hand column. Look at that for e-commerce. Almost 60% of the e-commerce software spend for 2017 is going to be in the cloud for Tier 2 and Tier 3 retailers. That makes perfect sense because those guys, they don't want to be IT shops. They want to be retailers. And so this is the one way they can compete online with some of these guys without having to have a full-blown IT shop under their wings. Store systems, same deal there. 40% of store systems in the cloud for this coming year for these retailers. Now, when you look at the large retailers, the Tier 1 guys, look at the merchandising and supply chain figures. These numbers are gigantic. And when you look at the growth for these things, down there in the bullets there, it's an even more startling story. This is reality. These, for these retailers, this is one of the ways that they're seeking to drive costs out of the supply chain. And their intent is to move forward to do just that. When we talk about some of the technologies that retailers are looking to purchase for the coming year, keep in mind the dark blue there it's already in place. It's up to date. They don't need to do anything. The light blue is what they're planning on purchasing in 2017. Green is 2018, and orange is further out. And what you're looking at there for POS client, that's POS hardware and POS software, these are the biggest numbers we've seen for POS in quite a while. It's really, really stunning, especially when you consider that, the idea that maybe, just maybe, these retailers have done what they wanted to do in the back, their back-end systems, so that now they can spend in the store. These are big numbers and should be great news for a whole lot of vendors. The digital signage part, now, this is where it really gets interesting because as retailers have done their homework in the back, they now realize that they have to do something in the store to make the store attractive. It wasn't all that long ago where consumers had to go shopping. They had to go into the retailer stores because there wasn't any alternative. But with the advent of the internet, competitors like Amazon and eBay and you name it, now consumers have a choice. And so retailers are now put in the position of they have to create a situation where consumers want to come into their stores. And that's a completely different mindset than anything they've had to deal with in days gone by. Some of the other technologies, these are the mobile technologies. These are also pretty big for the coming year. And keep in mind, every moment that a manager can spend on the floor rather than in the back office doing something is another moment where profitability of their stores increases, because he's the guy that sees what needs to be done. He's the one that assigns tasks and so forth. So any mobility that retailers can provide for their managers is a very, very good thing for the bottom line. Mobile for associates that continues to grow. And mobile POS, we had the first wave of mobile POS, and there was a lot of angst involved in that. There was a lot of some trial and error and that kind of stuff. But there were enough retailers sitting on the sidelines watching and taking note of what was happening and what was good and what was not so good, that now these guys have actually started to embrace this, and they are moving forward. And so you see some pretty big numbers for those mobile technologies there, and including mobile consumer mobile checkout there at the bottom. Once again, slicing the data by what we're calling the leading retailers. I mean, those numbers speak for themselves. I mean, it's stunning, really. I mean, huge increase in likeliness of using these devices and then for these retailers that we're calling leading retailers. And with that, let me pass it to Joe, because we're gonna. Oh, yeah, went too far.
Well, I definitely want to jump in. Okay. By the way, I just want to note we got another great comment by one of our listeners, people who are viewing and not just sitting back and maybe multitasking. A great one that pertains to Tim's last comment and some of the comments about networking and connectivity to stores, and we're going to get to that in just a few minutes too. But Tim, let me just point out that we just talked a lot about the strong shift to the cloud, and also a lot of great high investment by leaders in mobility and mobile devices, mobile POS for stores. What are retailers learning as they make this shift?
This is one of the most exciting developments, I think, in retail. It really creates an opportunity where dollars spent you can actually answer that question of how do I do more with less to a large extent, expanding capabilities with a smaller budget to a large extent. But I think my encouragement to retailers is to go in with their eyes wide open and to really look at that from a holistic perspective. We are seeing unfortunate stories of where this is not working over and over again. It has often been said that, the customer experience, and I would also add to that the employee experience, is not being defined by, what we see in the stores. It's being defined by the consumer's experience with Apple, with Google, and Uber. That level of convenience, that level of highly elevated expectation. And in that spirit, I would also say that their expectations are being defined by what they experience at home. At home, a consumer has 15, 25 megabits of internet access for their own personal use. And then they walk into the store, and a typical store today has maybe 3, 10 megabits of capacity available for guest Wi-Fi. That same consumer is sharing 3, 10 megabits with dozens of other customers, dozens of other employees. It's a setup for a very unsatisfactory experience. And that's what we see time and time again, and particularly as it relates to a lot of the clienteling type solutions. I'm astounded at the literally thousands of iPads that are sitting in drawers out there today. And it's unfortunately the same story repeated many times over. We were exploring clienteling solutions. We deployed it to a dozen or so flagship locations. It worked out great. We got the business results that we were looking for. We went ahead and deployed it to 500, thousands of locations. Only the 500,000 locations don't have the same infrastructure that the flagship locations set up. And that first time that the store associate pulls out that iPad and says, let me show you some alternative styles, and it takes 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds for the page to download so that they can show the advice that they're looking for, that consumer at home won't wait more than 5 seconds before they'll skip over to the next website. They're going to take that same kind of attitude in the stores. If the store associate can't answer my question in 5 seconds or less, I'm ready to move on to something else. And the first time that customer walks away from the associate holding that iPad goes into the drawer, and they are not going to lose another sale like that again. So as it relates to mobile POS or mobile clienteling solutions, I strongly encourage a very sober look at what are we talking about in terms of the infrastructure for the store. If a consumer has 15, 25 megabits at home, how are you going to create a compelling experience in the store? Retailers don't get to choose how much capacity. That's one of the tough realities of retail IT. You don't always get to choose how much capacity you have to any given store, but you always get to choose how you use that capacity. And it's incumbent on the retailers to be as smart as possible with whatever capacity is available.
Good points. Good points. Getting to the home stretch here. We talked about unified commerce, and for this slide, we had to use the term cross-channel commerce because unified commerce embraces the idea of POS, and we've already talked about POS. So here we're just talking about some of the capabilities of unified commerce, sans POS for these slides. The first bar up there at the top, again, the dark blue is current capability. It's already installed. It doesn't need to be updated or anything like that. The light blue is what they expect to obtain within the calendar year 2017, green 2018, and so forth. the first bar there, return online purchases at the store, this is actually a fairly expensive thing for retailers to do. And it has to do with the fact that, now there's a return coming to your store that you didn't sell. I mean, you the store didn't sell. And so there has to be some way of storing it or staging it or returning it either to an in-house service or a third-party service for return, because you can't just take that item and then stick it back on the store, although there are retailers that actually do that. This is an expensive proposition, but retailers have embraced this because of the customer service aspect of it. In other words, the retailer, the consumer is coming back to the store because they are dissatisfied with their online purchase. The last thing the retailer wants to do is basically tell them to, go pound sand. You can't do that. You've got to give them a reason to continue shopping with them, and either you've got the identical item in the store or in the right color or right size or what have you, and they can fulfill the item that way, or they make sure that it can be shipped from another store, another warehouse or whatever, and be delivered the next day. However, the retailer chooses to satisfy that customer so that indeed when that customer leaves the store, it's not with a bad taste in their mouth, but rather these guys bent over backwards to make this situation right. And that's a good thing. We've talked about central order management before. Basically, retailers are well down the road here. Big purchases coming up this year, and that should be exciting for vendors. Ship from store, we've talked about that as well. A lot of retailers are saying they can do this already. I'm kind of skeptical about this particular data point, because I think maybe there's 10% of the dark blue that really ought to be shaded light blue. And that's just the analyst looking at things and saying, I don't know. I think that's a little optimistic there. Click and collect. This is actually one of the less expensive things for retailers to do, because it's a matter of, you have your online presence, that they make the purchase there, and then they go to the store and actually pick it up. So the retailer is not shipping it to the customer, but they want to make sure there's an availability at the store. So again, we get back to the idea of inventory visibility as being really key to making some of these things work correctly. The last row there, the holistic merchandising across channels. In days gone by, as retailers began adding sales channels, they also added, the merchandising team to make sure that sales channel was taken care of in terms of planning and provisioning and so forth. Well, retailers now having this idea of we're one enterprise, we're not separate channels. Maybe it's time that they consolidate their planning groups into one, but they still have the expertise that can deal with each and every one of the channels. So maybe there's some cost savings embraced there, and the idea that indeed they can have a consistent planning effort across all of the channels that they deal with. This is good stuff going forward. Here's some of the other inventory view things. Checking inventory at other stores. There's 40-some% there. That's a big deal. That's already in place. This is good, because if I go into the local XYZ retailer and he does not have what I want, but he's got a store 3 miles away, it's not a big deal for me to go to the other store and get it, or arrange for it to be delivered from the store the next day. This is important stuff. Ordering inventory at other stores, same kind of idea there. The first one is just checking. The second is actually having a transaction happen. And that requires an up-to-date POS system that can actually accomplish that and bring it about. The split ticket there at the bottom. Now, this is really important from the standpoint of businesses that are looking to make purchases from the retailer. In other words, typically a business will issue a PO, right? And it doesn't matter to them at the time they write the PO that all the things that they have on that list might not be in the store. So the retailer has the ability then to split the ticket up. So we've got items 1 through 5 that are in the store, and the customer can pick them up right now, but items 6 through 10 are somewhere else. They're either at another store or at the DC or what have you. So the ability to split that ticket in that manner and have fulfillment happen in the most efficient way possible is a big deal, especially when dealing with retailers, or excuse me, with businesses. And again, slicing the data according to leaders, by the end of this year, leaders are 46% more likely to be using OMS. They're embracing this in a big way. They're more likely to do ship from store and do split tickets. They recognize the value of these kinds of things. And in the case of the ship from store, there's probably some RFID technology that has to be a part and parcel of that in order to get more than one inventory count a year. Maybe it's one a day or maybe it's multiple a day, depending on the type of retailer that you're talking about. Important stuff here that we're looking at going forward. Long story short, these are the things that retailers have to do in order to effectively compete. And again, it's not just a matter of going toe-to-toe with Amazon. It's a matter of being the one with the sneakers on that are competing in your day-to-day, head-to-head bouts with other retailers in your segments. You need to make the massive investments in unified commerce and all the technologies that we talked about at the very beginning, and embracing the idea that this is a transformation for the vast majority of retailers. It's a new way of doing things, and it's something that needs to be embraced in order for the most efficiency to be drawn out of the system. You need to leverage cloud, and again, that's the jump start. That's the pay-as-you-go instead of a huge capital expense. And being able to do that in such a way that it's the most efficient investment of your time and efforts going forward for these kinds of updates. You need to take advantage of mobile. You need to learn, some of the lessons that folks did that were the first, among the first wave of doing this. You really need to have a good, sound, logical mobile roadmap. It's not enough to just buy devices and deploy them. You got to have a roadmap that tells you, here's the who, what, where, when, and why of doing this. It's not just a procurement effort. It's a planning effort. And then finally, create the wow experience for the customer. And the example that I have is my daughter Emma is 11 years old now, and having one of those Disney RFID bands and turning the corner, and there's Snow White with her two handlers who are telling her exactly who it is that's just come around the corner, and Snow White leans down and looks in my daughter's eyes and said, "Emma, how is your day going today?" And think of the impact that has, because my daughter will then want to buy everything that has anything to do with Snow White in the stores within the park. And then she's going to come home and she's going to tell all her friends about her experience, and they're going to tell their parents about it. And then when she has children of her own down the road, she's going to tell her kids about that experience. So this is a huge, huge impact. And that's just one example of this kind of thing. Retailers really need to look at what they do in their own stores and be able to make their own wow experience for their customers. And with that, one last slide. Basically, we've just scratched the surface in terms of the data in this study. We have an expanded version of the study. It's on our website. It's called Amazon Has a Tiger by the Tail. And with that, let me pass that back to Joe.
Thanks a lot, Lee, and outstanding presentation. And as Lee has pointed out, Lee has taken some of this data and added a lot to it, actually, as well as digging in a little deeper, and created a unique report that IHL has. But that does not take away from the report that we have here. That's one click download away. It's on the top of your screen. That also has all the highlights and digs into all the highlights we talked about. Now, Tim, we're going to get to some audience Q&A here in a second, but we've just gone through the main takeaways from the 2017 Store System Study. What kind of points leap out strongly to you?
So many to choose from, so many to pick from. You mentioned a little bit earlier, I think the biggest astounding the fact that came from this report was that 87% to 237% increase in order to effectively, and this was a retail IT executive's perspective on what they need to spend in order to catch up and how to bridge that gap. Talked a little bit earlier about how this idea of, looking at the dollar spend versus retail performance. And it's not realistic to see a 20-fold increase in or hope for a 20-fold increase in your IT budget. So what do you do instead of that? Where can you put your dollars to get a greater magnifier than Amazon? A dollar spent by Amazon can improve their business only by so much. But a dollar spent by a retailer could potentially unlock a lot of latent, hidden potential in the stores. So, for example, if I think about, I could spend $1 or throw my dollar toward a magic mirror, and for that one store, for the customer who goes into the dressing room, they're going to have an expanded and enhanced experience. Or I could take that same dollar and I could potentially throw it instead toward the network infrastructure. And now suddenly I can improve all of my cloud applications. I can improve all of my customers' guest Wi-Fi experiences, their mobile experience on the app, and the ability to even redeem their loyalty programs. So when we think about how we spend, how we invest, and from a technology perspective, one of my great passions is looking at technology and people, that intersection of where can we get the most business benefit and advantage for. Another kind of a very well-known problem in retail is as it looks at the employee, and I think I just end with this kind of one sobering thought. You think about what we are talking about as it relates to creating a wow customer experience in retail. It's the equivalent of going to a Broadway theater, but now asking the janitor and the receptionist to get on stage and try to create an entertaining experience that's going to bring people back over and over and over again. The store associate before, their only job was to just keep the store clean and keep the shelves full of product. Now we're asking them to create an experience, and that doesn't happen without some meaningful paradigm changes in terms of how we engage and train our employees. And so if I were to take my dollar, and I would start looking at spending the dollar toward, I'm always astounded that as I engage with retailers, there's always excitement about the new flashy toy in terms of the technology that we could bring into the stores. But I'm always astounded that when it comes time to sign contracts and actually buy stuff, that so much of that goes back to the meat and potatoes of, training the employees and improving their experience in the stores. Happier employees create a better experience for their customers. And so it's these kinds of meat and potato type things where I think if we look at where we're spending our dollars, that we can get that magnifier that we're looking at, where a dollar spent toward, for example, the associate training and engagement, or toward an SD-WAN implementation of the stores, or those type of solutions can dramatically improve the store experience for not only the customer, but also for the employee.
Okay, Tim, great comment. I want to ask you a quick yes or no. It's all you get for this one, yes or no. Does Hughes spend any money at all on R&D?
Yes, of course, yes. A massive amounts. We are an engineering company at heart.
Okay. Now, would it be possible, now one of our smart CIOs who's listening in made this point, what is the dollar spend that top technology vendors spend, and isn't it possible for retailers to actually leverage what their vendors are doing to get them to catch up without actually spending, doubling or tripling their technology spend today? So I'm going to toss that to you, Tim, and to you, Lee. Isn't that a great piece of advice?
That's a question that basically provides a very good summary of how we do business. I mean, and the answer is absolutely yes. It's particularly in this day of age when we look at service models now. We are no longer in a world where we build and make these massive investments into new technologies and then ask a customer to basically pay for it all. It's technology as a service. It's innovation as a service. That all of the massive investments that we're making to transform and try to solve these practical problems in retail, the other fundamental thing is there's just a limited amount of capital to work with. And so as we look into the market, it's not enough to bring the right technology and the right solutions in terms of designing, creating, engineering these solutions, but it's also providing a business model where a customer can pay on a per month, per site, per store, per employee even type kind of service. So where we can take the capital the CapEx burden and translate it into an OpEx solution that a customer can more easily accommodate, that's more consistent and more easily aligned with their business. We were trying to look for removing the barriers by making these technologies and these innovations more accessible to the retailers.
And Lee, I think you alluded to that by encouraging retailers to do more spending in the cloud.
Yeah, and I think Tim's point is right on, because the best solutions are the collaborative ones. The ones where the retailer and the vendor get together, they identify the problem together, and they can work forward towards a solution. I mean, anytime someone brings a solution looking for a problem to solve, then that's fraught with awful stuff. So I think Tim's point is right on there.
Now, Tim, we have another apparel, footwear, smart retailer saying that, hey, we're pretty satisfied with our store communications right now. The only problem we have is with the last mile. Any advice there?
Absolutely. That is the biggest problem, that last mile. The core, from an internet perspective, works great, but it's how do I get that end final piece to the store, because that's the bottleneck, and that's where all the challenges run. And now what I encourage there is you get as much capacity as you can afford to that store, and then you get as smart as you can in how you use it. And what I mean by that is you magnify that capacity virtually. It may be in some locations you're able to get 50 meg. Great. No, there are very little problems there. But many of your locations may only be able to get 3 meg, 10 meg, whatever the case may be. Leverage technology. Take that 3 meg, 6 meg circuit, magnify it 2 times, 3 times to get more capacity out of it. But then also be extremely smart in terms of how you use it. We see time and time again missteps, if you will, in terms of just taking my enterprise applications and throwing them on these broadband connections and then saying, my point-of-sale transactions are taking too long. This doesn't work. I have to go back to the expensive stuff. There are wonderful technologies to first understand how much capacity you have, and then in real time shape your traffic and prioritize it so that you can accommodate for the dynamics of an internet connection. So the idea here is get as much capacity as you can, get as smart as you can in terms of how you use it. Magnify it, shape your traffic to fit into it, and then prioritize it in order to get that enterprise type experience through it. These are not simple problems. Have a very healthy respect for how challenging it is, but they're solvable. There are solutions in place that are available to fix these issues.
Well, Tim, as usual, very insightful comments. I really loved your image there of how we're trying to deliver wow factors and pretty much asking the lowest people on the rung to try to do it. That was one of the great insights for me. And Lee, many insights throughout the retail system study, store system study. Pleasure working with you on it again for our 14th year. And unfortunately, that's going to have to do it for us. I'm going to have to leave your comment, Tim, as the last one for us. We're definitely running out of time. There are other questions here in our queue, and we'll be sure to get back to you after the webinar is over. So today, I want to thank our outstanding panel for being here. So thanks a lot, Lee. Thanks for the great presentation.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure.
And Tim, thank you for the great discussion and answer to really some interesting questions from our audience members today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It was a great opportunity.
And I do want to thank all of you in the audience today for joining us. Please join us again for the next RIS web session, and have a great day.